How to deal with enemies. Here's a spiritual lens. So let's first unpack the kind of belief system that is necessary to even ask a question like this. You see, in order to have enemies, you need to see the world in a particular way. And that is through a lens of opposition, us versus them. Instead of course, in an integrated way. Because if you truly integrate the understanding, the wisdom of oneness, which is a teaching in most spiritual belief systems, even though sometimes it's a bit cryptic. And if you understand that we are all connected, one entity, there can be no enemy but the self. And to be at war with the self is simply insanity. And let's face it, so many of us are. When we truly incorporate this way of seeing, we can understand all acts of war, colonialism, genocide, as an attack on the self, as a cancer, and therefore as insanity. And if we take a view of healing instead, one of rehabilitation, we can really begin to move forward. Of course, we will need the majority of people on our planet to take this stance before it can really take effect on the collective energy, so that those essentially with sanity are in the majority. And then we can help to heal the greed and the insanity of the rest, that separatist insanity. But it truly begins with us. So how then, with this understanding, do we deal with our enemies? Well, I think it needs to be with a whole lot of love and compassion. Now, I know this can be a hard pill to swallow, even for me. Because in many situations, people have truly done awful, awful things. I hear you, I know. To me too. And I may sound idealistic or crazy, but if we do continue this cycle of blame and persecution and shaming and guilting, the ostracization, we will continue to perpetuate this same cycle over and over again. Each villain, each perpetrator has their own story of being perpetrated against. And so the victim becomes the villain. It has happened over and over again in history, in our collective narratives and our individual stories through our bloodlines. The abused child becomes the abusing adult. The colonized nation becomes the colonizing nation. And oppressed peoples turn into oppressors. And I personally don't want any part of this cycle anymore. I will heal. And this does mean that we need to stop seeing each other as exactly that. A, other, separate, and B, as the villain, as something to be exterminated, but rather as another aspect of ourselves needing healing, integration, and love. Now, of course, this does not mean that actions should not have consequences. There should still be consequences. But these consequences should be given out in a way that generates healing, reflection, so that we can dissolve the shame and the guilt and the pain, instead of embedding that guilt and shame deeper into our genetics. If we truly accept this idea of oneness and interconnectedness, and we learn to see others as aspects of ourselves, those villains, they become abandoned archetypes within us, needing integration, needing to come in, to come home, to be healed instead of cut out. To annihilate even a villain is a murderous action, and so quickly turns us into the villain. So what do you think? Do you have enemies?